Hello, everybody. So I have been following this Silicon Valley Bank situation all day, and I think this is the catastrophic event that could get us a pivot much sooner than we think. That's a feeling I'm getting. But first of all, let me just go through what's happening. So over exactly 30 hours, I posted my first video, most video on the channel, what's going on at Silicon Valley Bank. Then in the evening yesterday, I posted another video. Is a bank run happening? I said, yes, definitely a bank run happening. And today, around noon, we hear that the FDIC sieved and established a receiver for Silicon Valley Bank, which means that the shareholders are getting wiped out, and which means that the FDIC is taking over because the bank run is done. And the bank run, is finished, and essentially the FDIC had to intervene. They could not find a buyer in the process, right? Overnight, SVB tried to find a wealthy buyer for the company. That did not succeed, and so FDIC had to step in and take over SVB. And so, this is a major issue, right? Major issue because last 10K they had $374 billion of client deposits. They have less now, but the numbers vary from website to website. Some say 250 billion, others say close to 300 billion. Anyways, it's more than 200 billion for sure. And as far as the uninsured losses, CNBC is reporting that they had $152 billion in uninsured losses. Nonetheless, that means that you probably have at least $100 billion in insured losses, insured by the FDIC. So again, why did this happen? Why did SVB, a company that was founded in the early 80s, a 50-year-old bank, the panic did that. It's the panic that did that, right? SVB tried to address the problem by raising funds, right, and doing a capital raise, and by taking a loss on their MBS. But as soon as that news got out, people started getting scared, and they got all of their money out all at once. Right, and Peter Thiel issued a notice to its entrepreneurs, and a lot of entrepreneurs got out of the door first, and all of the money was drained out of SVB, which made SVB go bankrupt essentially. And it's the news, it's that news that they had issues with customer withdrawals, and they had issues with customer spend. They had issue meeting customer spend. That news precipitated the collapse of SVB. It is literally a collapse. I mean, it is stunning. This is the 16th largest bank in the United States. Like, this is absolutely stunning what is happening here. This would be the biggest bank in most countries, in most places in the world. Like, this is insane. Anyways, moving on. So they have $152 billion in uninsured losses. What we mean by uninsured losses is an account with more than $250,000. Any account that has more than $250,000, anything above $250,000 is not insured. And this is an example of, there's thousands of tweets like this, but this is an example of a random entrepreneur that I found. And entrepreneur's probably very depressed, and he says, I'm continuing to build my business, and assuming I will not get back my $800,000. So this startup entrepreneur who's trying to build a marketplace for engineer, they lost $800,000, or at least it's in limbo. They don't know if they're gonna get the $800,000 back. So anyways, but this is affecting much bigger companies now. Much bigger companies. So Roku, for example, just announced that they had $487 million of their cash reserves. 26% of their cash was stuck at Silicon Valley Bank. So that money's gone, right? That money's probably gone. It's not there anymore because of a bank run. And so Roku, again, very, very upsetting. Very upsetting. Roku lost about a fourth of its cash cushion, and this makes you think a lot about anti-fragility, which is all about having cash and making sure that you're prepared in case the business goes south or anything happens. Well, if you have cash, if you're prepared in case the business goes south, and then your cash you can't access because one of the banks that you added at at a bank run. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, Roku did good management here. They had their cash spread across 4 different investments grade, reputable scalable banks, right? How many banks do public companies need to have? Do public companies need to spread their money across 20 banks, across 30 banks? Maybe this is going to be one of the major takeaways. Maybe 4 or 5 banks is not enough to protect your cash, right? There's much more companies. We're hearing 8Ks filed all over. If you go into the SEC, look at all these 8Ks getting filed. The most recent one, Roblox, about 8% of their cash lost. Rocketlab, I think they had like $40 or $50 million lost. So this is spreading to a lot of companies out there. Millions of startups cannot pay their workers, suppliers, have everything frozen right now. This is a black swan event. Love or hate, Nicolas Taleb, but this is a black swan event. This is why firms need anti-fragility. When I think about this, I can't help but thinking about the fact that no matter what, Tesla has $250 million stored in a brain wallet, self-custodied within Tesla, right? MicroStrategy, they have what, $2.5-3 billion worth of Bitcoin stored in a brain wallet without any counterparty risk, right? Whenever you have money stored at a bank, you have counterparty risk. This is absolutely crazy what's happening. I just can't stop talking about it. It's crazy. But anyways, let me move on. So, you remember in October, November, the biggest collapse, crypto's a scam, Bitcoin's a scam, those Bitcoin banks are a scam. Well, yeah, that's the whole point as to why today we have technology where we don't need counterparty risk today. We used to need counterparty risk because you couldn't go around with gold in your pocket. Because if you moved around in the 1400s, if you moved around Europe with gold in the pocket, you would have thieves come to you, steal that gold from you. That's the whole reasons for banks to exist. That's why you can put your quote-unquote gold at a trusted third party. Today, with technology, we don't need trusted third parties anymore. You can store money in your head with a simple code. So anyways, this is what can happen to banks. This is the history of banks. This has always happened to banks, except when I go back to the news cycle around FTX and all the collapse in crypto, and the news, the media made it look like the devil, like the worst thing ever. And it's just that the counterparty structure, the bank structure, is the structure that is bad. And in fact, what happened in those crypto banks can and has just happened to the 16th smallest bank in the United States. And look at the damage. You are 16 times worse. This is 16 times worse, SVB. And these are uninsured losses. The uninsured losses are 16 times worse than FTX. But that's not it. Because you also have insured losses, right? And these insured losses, they're going to be covered by the FDIC. But what are those insured losses? Well, if I go from the balance sheet and I calculated uninsured reported by CNBC and I remove that from the total deposits, that'd be up to $223 billion insured. But it's probably much less than that. Way less, because people ran out and companies ran out, and there's a bunch of companies that were able to get out. But how much less than that is it that's left uninsured? Is it 50 billion? Is it 70 billion? Is it 120 billion? Well, guess what? If it's in the order of 100 billion insured on that bank, the entire FDIC deposit fund, the entire fund, is $128 billion as of today. $128 billion. That's the entire fund. So if you're being reasonable and looking at how many of these losses are going to be covered by FDIC, the collapse of SVB probably uses the full insurance amount. So what does that mean if you have money at another bank and the first bank to fail is the first one to access these insurance funds, right? What does that mean? This tells me that they're gonna find someone. This is going to be the same thing as 2007, 2008, where they sat bankers in the room and they tell them, you have to bail out. You have to do this bailout. Because if they don't find someone, there's going to be more banks that are going to go into this process, and this is never going to be enough. FDIC, we've known this. We've said this for the past 10 years. We've known that there's not enough money in the FDIC, right? You're looking at it right now. The numbers, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little excited, but the numbers of the losses reasonably, not calculated from the balance sheet, but if I reasonably assume how many people were able to get out and how many people were not able to get out but still insured, those losses probably amount to $100 billion. So most of the FDIC funds would probably go toward SVB, and then there's no FDIC anymore. Look at this. This is even worse, right? Silvergate. Well, people reported Silvergate as a bank failure, but it's technically a voluntary shutdown, right? Silvergate lost a lot of money because of crypto, but they're also a real bank, and so FDIC may have to intervene to Silvergate. So Silvergate went bankrupt on Wednesday, right? Voluntary bankruptcy. They had to take over SVB on Friday. So in a matter of 3 days, we have a relatively small bank and a pretty large bank, per the standards of most countries, that have just collapsed. And so this is absolutely insane. This is why I think the Fed will pivot. The Fed will pivot. That's what I believe. That's what I've always believed. The FDIC, anyways, does not have enough money to cover all of the losses of uninsured. Like it will only take one more bank, and then they will not have enough money. So what they're going to do, I believe, is they're going to do everything they can to find a white knight, right? To find that company that jumps in and acquires SVB. That's what they're going to scrambling over the weekend. That's what the market seems to believe. When you look at a stock like Roku and the fact that they lost $500 million in SVB and the stock is not that down that much after hours, like 4%, that means that the market believes that there's going to be a bailout. We're going to have to do something about this, because obviously these numbers don't work. I don't think SVB is the first bank to drop. If the Fed keeps raising, if the Fed keeps tightening, this will not be the first bank. The losses from the drop in the bond market are just too high. This is not how the financial system is built. When you raise rates so fast, you end up with bonds losing money too quick, and then banks can't meet their obligation. Remember, this already happened. The whole UK private pension system almost collapsed. If it were not for a Bank of England printing $73 billion, that was 4 months ago. 4 months ago. Let me show you what happens with bonds. Right? Most banks, insurance companies have invested their deposits in an asset class that has been, for the longest time, right, for more than 100 years, considered safe, right? That asset class was bonds, and bonds crashed much more than stocks. And I hope this is a very, very telling example. This is the S&P 500, right? So a lot of old world companies in there, and it did 36% since May 1st of 2020 until today. And if you compare this to the largest mortgage-backed securities ETF, it did minus 17%. So you have a delta of over 50% between the performance of the stock market and the performance of the bonds. This is a crash of insane proportion for bonds. Bonds are not supposed to move like that. Bonds don't move that fast. The reason why these banks, these insurance companies are posting or are going to have to realize, right? People don't dig into the 10Ks. They have unrealized losses, but they are going to have realized losses because of this, because the Fed moved way too quickly. And because the Fed moved way too quickly, banks didn't have a time to let these MBS mature naturally as mortgages get paid off, as principals get repaid, as people sell their house. These mortgages move naturally, right? And they didn't have enough time. Right? Like an economy, banks can cope. They can cope with say a small 0.25%, 0.5% increase each year. We can cope with that. Right? But we can't cope with the speed of increases of interest rates. Like banks didn't have the time to let their old maturities expire, their old bonds expire and replace them with newer maturities. They didn't have the time. Hence those unrealized losses and those major losses, and hence people being very scared. They didn't have enough time to prepare. The Fed caught everybody off guard, and this is why this is happening. Again, I believe the Fed will pivot. This is not supposed to be a fearful moment. I believe the Fed will pivot. They have no choice. This is my logic telling me this. They have no choice. A bailout will happen. That's my conviction. Like I said, FDIC doesn't even cover, or probably just covers, the insured losses of Silicon Valley Bank. Like, they will have to intervene. Because, you know, they're not going to be okay with FDIC funds being that low again. They're not going to be okay. And then keep this in mind, right? Look at the other companies that have mortgage-backed securities, which have moved way more down than the rest of the bond market, right? Because right now, mortgages, 30-year mortgages at 7%. And it was at like less than 3%, 15 months ago. So, of course, the value of those bonds, dropped. It didn't get halved, but, almost, right? It got dropped so much. So these companies lost their money. And unrealized losses. Again, unrealized losses, not a problem if customers leave their funds. Not a problem if customers leave their funds. But, I would invite you to look. Like, if you look at Bank of America, for example, $581 billion. Right? Wells Fargo, $280 billion. Now, companies like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, US Bancorp, they're money center banks. They're supposed to be much safer. But you see, for example, when you look at a company like Schwab, that's pretty concerning. Minus 11%. And what does Schwab have? $285 billion worth of, MBS for. So, I think we need to be very careful about that counterparty risk. I maintain this. The risk over the long run, if there is no bank run, is very low. Like, as long as we keep banking with this bank, is very low. But the risk, if there is a bank run, which today is so easy to have because of the internet, because of a news cycle, that's what can precipitate these collapses. And so let me just conclude with that. There is counterparty risk. The idea that you're earning risk-free money in your savings account is not true, because your financial institution can go bankrupt. Like, anybody who had more than $250,000 at Silicon Valley Bank is not going to get more than $250. They're going to get the remainder, right? So anything above $250, maybe they're going to get 30% back, 20%, 10% back, right? The counterparty risk means you're safe up to $250. And then you're not safe. And so anyways, what that means is that the risk-free rate, right, the whole idea that you get no risk with a savings account is not true. There is counterparty risk if the bank fails. And I've made a few videos on Bitcoin on my channel, and I know it doesn't resonate with a lot of people because it's not really trendy right now, but I understand, therefore, that storing Bitcoin in your head for a brain wallet, memorizing a 12-word code, is not for everyone. I perfectly understand this, and that a lot of people prefer to have counterparty risk, right? I understand that Bitcoin is volatile, but that doesn't bother me to store some cash in Bitcoin, because you have zero counterparty risk in Bitcoin when you store it in a brain wallet. When you just memorize 12 words, you have no counterparty risk, right? It's the same as having cash. So it's the same as having cash. But if you're not comfortable with the counterparty risk, with storing on your own, with all of that world of zero counterparty risk, if you're not comfortable with that world, which I agree is very techie, very specific, the other question that I think one should ask themselves is, if you park cash, are you at the least getting compensated for the extra risk that you're taking, right? If you're taking a risk, counterparty risk is real. We had the second bank run in the history of the United States. Counterparty risk is real. Mainstream banks can go bankrupt. If you look at the size of SVB, is the same size as Citibank. It's not too different from US Bank. These are household names. Okay, these big banks can have a run on them, right? And so, because that's the reality right now with the Fed raising those rates, you got to ask yourself, are you getting compensated for that extra risk? Are you getting compensated? And I'll finish with this. Right? This is Bank of America. This is how much Bank of America pays on the checking account. So you're getting compensated 0.01% APY for that counterparty risk. And remember, on my list, Bank of America is number one. They have $581 billion of mortgage-backed securities. You're getting compensated this. If you want counterparty risk and be in the traditional banking system, neobanks compensate you much more for your risk. This is an example of SoFi. If you have a checking account with SoFi, SoFi compensates you 3.75% APY for that counterparty risk of bankruptcy. Now I realize that banks have different levels of safety, but SVB was a highly reputable bank, highly ranked bank, voted best bank in the country multiple times. Go on their website. They brag about all of their awards. That was a premium bank. Probably just as premium as any of the banks on this list. So what I will say is I understand that for example, storing Bitcoin or a stable coin in one's head is not for everyone. I understand that. But then, if you have counterparty risk, make sure A, you're getting compensated for that risk, and B, make sure you spread it out over multiple financial institutions. Actually, I have a little bit of money in Schwab, and I initiated a transfer this afternoon when I saw that, right? So make sure you diversify. Anyways, that's not advice, right? That's what I do. But I'm sorry if this is so crazy what's happening today. So anyways, thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. I'm almost at 1,000 followers. I can't believe it. It's so great. But this is not investment advice. This is just entertainment. I hope. I mean, this is not very entertaining today. But anyways, I appreciate your likes. I appreciate your subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.